All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started with this session. Welcome to the Young Drivers and Traffic Fatalities 20 Years of Progress and Next Steps for Achieving Zero. Our speaker is Pam Fisher. A little bit about her. She's recognized as one of the nation's leading experts on behavioral traffic safety. Her passion for this work, coupled with a proven track record for engaging others, has helped her successfully develop and implement safety initiatives across the U.S. and internationally. From teen driving and pedestrian safety to distraction and impairment, Pam believes everyone must play a role in improving safety on our roadways. Her nearly 4 decades-long career has included leadership roles with AAA, the New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety, her own consulting firm, and currently with the Governor's Highway Safety Association. She has authored more than a dozen national traffic safety reports and contributed to many others, and is the co-author of Not So Fast, Parenting Your Teens Through the Dangers of Driving. Pam is a native of Hershey, Pennsylvania, and has called the Northwest New Jersey her home for many years. Let's welcome Pam.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great. Okay. Well, welcome to our session. We're going to be moving kind of rapid fire, and as you heard, I am from the Northeast, so we talk fast, we move fast, we drive fast, unfortunately. We are about getting things done, as you all are too, but I will definitely be going through this pretty quickly, because usually when I do this session, I usually have about 90 minutes, so this is going to be pretty quick. I want people to ask questions, don't hesitate, and I'm going to be here throughout the day. I am doing another session later this afternoon on a very fascinating and exciting topic of strategic planning, so don't miss that. But this morning we're going to talk about teams. So I want to just go quickly through this, and there's the QR code. If you want to get a copy of this report, I wrote this report, came out in 2023, and that's what we're going to focus on today. You heard Lisa this morning in the general session talking about this report and some of the data. So we're going to just share a little bit about the data, and then we're going to talk about how this has come about. And many of you have played a role in that, and how we keep it moving forward. Because unfortunately, while we've seen the numbers come down in the last couple of years, we're starting to see them go like this. So we can't let up. This is really, really important. So we wrote this report. We also wrote this report with the idea that it was a 20-year period, and we were commemorating something. We have a partnership with the Ford Driving Skills for Life program. It is a free program that moves around the country. It's a 4-hour program designed to give teen drivers some exposure to some things that are tripping them up on the road: speed and space management, hazard detection, and things of that sort. So we're in our 22nd year of that program, and so if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to check it out via the website link that you see up there. So let's talk data for a few minutes, okay? I think this is really, really important. For our analysis, and I worked with Dr. Jim Headland, who is a retired researcher with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, a longtime friend, and he's in his 80s and he's still doing this work, so some of us just never retire. I don't know that I'm going to retire either. I just love what I do. But we found, which is so exciting, is that when we looked at young drivers, and this is persons 20 years of age and younger, and we defined older drivers, which sounds kind of funny, as anybody that's 21 and up, okay? But that was for the purposes of the study. So young driver crash rates, and you all know this if you're working in this arena, are 4 times higher than for other drivers out there, right? And why? Why? Why are teens more likely to crash? Come on, why? Inexperience and? No. Thank you. Thank you. Underdeveloped brain. Immaturity. Their brain is not fully developed, and they are absolutely inexperienced. And you take those 2 things and you put them together, and it's a recipe for disaster, right? So it's a problem. Some young people are more mature than others, faster. Girls, usually the boys. But it is a problem, and I have my own experiences. I have a 29-year-old son, and even though I'm the safety mom, by the grace of God, he's still alive, and he drives, okay? That's all I'm going to say. You can ask me about that later. So as you can see from up here, and you heard Lisa talk about it this morning, when we looked at drivers under 21, look at the change over the past 20 years. almost a 40% drop. While for everybody else, it has gone up. And even more so for that 21 to about 25-year-old group, okay? It's a problem, okay? And we also look at all traffic fatalities. Again, look at teens, those under 21, and look at those over. So the numbers have definitely gone up, okay? I want you to think about young and older driver fatalities and how this has really happened. Fatalities decreased for those under 21, they went up for everybody else. That's that 20-year span, okay? I really want to stress that. And in 2002, young drivers accounted for about 15% of all driver fatalities. And in 2021, that rate fell to 8%. Almost a 15% decrease, always a 50% decrease. A few more numbers to share with you. We know that the best way to measure driver fatal crash involvement is to look at fatal crashes per VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, because that's exposure, that's what we're talking about. But we don't have national VMT driver data by age. We don't have that. So the next best measure is to look at fatal crashes by licensed driver, okay? And we know the proportion of young drivers who are licensed has decreased. Have you seen the number of young drivers go down?
Yes.
We've seen it, absolutely. There's lots of factors that have to do with that. A lot of it's economic. It's expensive. It's expensive, and we're living in crazy times, okay? We saw it in 2008 when we had the last market crash and things were not going so good. We had the recession. We definitely saw teen drivers going down in terms of who was getting licensed. Insure a car, have a car, operate and own a car. It's expensive, okay? And you have to get trained. Many states still require some form of training. And if it's not in your schools, then they've got to go out into the commercial market. So it's challenging. So the number of young licensed drivers decreased by about 6%, while the number of older drivers increased by about 21.5%. Okay, so you look at these tables so you can kind of get a sense of crash involvement. Again, we're seeing that for teens, the numbers definitely went down. And I want to stress one other thing I think that's important. While the young driver rate in 2021 was substantially higher than the older driver rate, okay, the difference has really narrowed, though kind of not as much as the difference in fatal crash involvement. And the drop in teen licensure, that drop in the number of kids that got licensed, only accounts for it's actually less than 1/4 of the decline in young driver fatal crash involvement. So even though we know there's fewer teens licensed, that's not what's driving this reduction. That's not it at all, okay? We also look at states, and I don't have Utah on here, but you can go to the report. I just pulled the top of the graphic out of the report. Young driver fatal crash rates have dropped substantially by state. So I encourage you to look at the report to see where we are with Utah. This is really important to understand what is going on in your own state.
Can you
Okay?
explain DC?
Explain DC, why it's so high?
181.
Yeah, because it's a very small subset. And think about it, if you have a small subset and you have a bunch of crashes, even 10, 11 crashes, fatal crashes, it makes the numbers go up a lot, okay? So, yeah, DC's kind of an anomaly, okay? And my office is based in DC, and I'm telling you, it's not a happy place to walk when you're a pedestrian. Lots of drivers, the city's influx of people during the course of the day is quite crazy. It really, really is. So, I also want to share some bad news. This just came out from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. We have lost some ground over the past 3 years. And, when the pandemic started, and I live in the Northeast, and the media outlets are going crazy, what's happening with this pandemic? And we all said in our office, wow, fewer people on the road, the numbers are going to drop, right? How many of us didn't think that? What happened? The numbers went up. We started getting reports from highway safety offices, and my organization represents the state highway safety offices, including Utah. We started hearing from them saying, oh my God, we don't know what's going on out there, but we're starting to see significant serious injury crashes, fatalities, speeding's rampant. Well, we know open road was an invitation for people to drive with a little bit of lunacy, right? So it really has impacted us in so many ways. But you can see, starting in 2020, we started to see some change here. Young driver fatalities, absolutely. We had a little bit of a dip here, 2022, but we need to regain our ground. So we need to think about what we're doing here, folks, because we've done so incredibly well, we certainly do not want to go backwards. So let's talk about how is this happening? What's driving this? What's brought about this change? And I can tell you with absolute certainty, it's these 5 things. We've done the research, we've looked at the peer-reviewed research that's done by many, many others. And number 1 on the list is graduated driver licensing. Has anybody not heard that term? Okay, hallelujah. Okay? Graduated driver's licensing is our 3-step licensing process that's in every state in the country. And it has been the most effective tool in the toolbox. Absolutely, without a doubt. It really, really is. Parental involvement. Let's be honest. We teach our teens to drive. They go through 6 hours of driver training, or maybe 10, depending upon the state you're in. Some kids don't have to do any professional driver training, instructor-taught training, right? And then we hand them off to who? Mom and dad, or a guardian. Maybe it's an older sibling that's licensed. And we say, take it from here. Parental involvement is critical. We need parents to understand their role. And the research shows when teens have engaged, actively engaged parents who monitor and coach in a constructive, productive way, they're less likely to crash, they're less likely to engage in risky behaviors like speeding, driving distracted, driving impaired, and not wearing their seatbelt. It absolutely works. But we need to get parents to work with us to do this. That's really, really critical. Driver education and behind-the-wheel training. You probably heard, if you're an old timer like me, there was this study that was done in DeKalb County, Georgia, that said it doesn't work. Well, I'm here to tell you, guess what, folks? It does. There's new research within the past 10 years that clearly shows that teens who get driver education and training, again, are less likely to violate and less likely to crash. They've looked at this in Oregon and Iowa and Canada and a lot of other states. They've done it in Georgia, and they've definitely shown that teens who go through some kind of a training program, who get some of that foundational stuff, okay, they do better. There's no doubt about it. But we need to build on this, and I'll talk about that. You heard Lisa talk about peer-to-peer traffic safety programs. I am a huge fan of their program. I've written about their program, I've looked at their program, they do it right. So Utah, I challenge you, I think Lisa's in the room, maybe, she's here. I'm challenging you because I saw the map this morning and I said, Lisa, your program isn't in Utah.
Not yet.
Not yet. Damn, bring that program to your state. It's really good. It really is. I wrote a national report for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration on the value of peer-to-peer programs. And I'll talk about those magic ingredients. You heard some of them this morning. But they work. They work as part of a bigger kind of environmental structure, but they absolutely work. So that has been a huge piece of this. We've seen groups like SAD and FCCLA and 4-H and others, as well as Lisa's program, really engage teens in this issue. I have met some of the most dynamic and amazing young people through some of these groups who are now working in traffic safety, who say, I get it. I want to make a difference. I want to continue to do this. So peer-to-peer programs are great. And the last thing we know that's contributed to this decline is absolutely safer vehicles and teen-specific technology. If you think about the cars on the road today versus 20, 30, 40 years ago, holy moly, the engineering in those cars is pretty amazing. So I'll go back and tell you about my son, please, Zachary. So when Zach had his license for 6 months, and I live in Jersey, where you cannot get your intermediate or what we call our provisional license as a teen until you're 17. We have the oldest licensing age in the country. So the first year, he got his permit at 16, we drove, and we drove, and we drove. He went through 30 hours of classroom. It's required in high schools in New Jersey to graduate. And then he did 6 hours, actually he did more than that. Minimum 6 hours of behind the wheel training, he did 10 with a driving school instructor, and I paid for that, and it was the best investment I could make in my team. We need to get other parents to understand that's an investment in your team. So he had his license for 6 months. He was driving, he was coming home from school, one of the most dangerous places for anybody to drive, right? I truly believe the most dangerous place on the road is the school parking lot at the end of the day. Right? I mean, how many of you are teachers? You know, right? So we have this T intersection at the high school, and he's got to make a left-hand turn. Well, guess what? That dump truck was coming, and he thought, I've got plenty of time. And he pulled out, and the dump truck sideswiped him. Mom's car, $10,000 worth of damage. Okay? Everybody was okay, but he learned a very valuable lesson, and we talked a lot about that. 9 days later, he, and the only person I let him drive with, because we have a 1-passenger restriction, I said one, was our neighbor Danny, and they played ice hockey together. Danny was a couple years younger than Zach. And they were driving to the high school to get the bus to go to a hockey tournament. And he left the house, and I said, I'll see you at the rink. And he drove up the street, and a young teen driver was coming the other way, and there was some slushy stuff on the road. It was December. And she overcorrected, and she came right at him. And I got the phone call, Mom, it's really bad. And I was like, where are you? I still get the chills when I say that. And he's now 29. I'm right up the street. She came right at us, Mom. I did everything I could to get out of the way, but she hit us. And she hit us head on. And then she spun and she hit us again. Okay. I don't even remember very much of other than throwing on a pair of shoes and literally running out my front door and running down the middle of the road. But he was okay. He was okay, but the vehicle saved his life. Absolutely. Plus, he had a seatbelt on, and the airbags imploded. But I said to him, we went to see the car afterwards, and I said, look at the pinch points in the steel reinforced safety cage. Look at that. Driver ed teachers, if you have an opportunity to do this with your kids, do it. Show them a wrecked car and show them how the technology works. Not to say to them, oh, you can go out and do anything crazy you want because the vehicle's going to save your life, but to help them understand the dynamics of a crash. Because it's huge. The forces of a crash are unbelievable. And the fact that he had the seatbelt on and did the right things saved his life, but the vehicle made the difference. So I don't want to belabor the point, but these technologies that are in vehicles are incredible. And if they're in their seatbelts, in that steel reinforced safety cage, there's a pretty good chance they're going to survive. Okay? But there's lots of other things, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So I want you to really understand the dynamics here when it comes to these 5 things. Really have made a difference. And I didn't mention this, but there are some specific technologies. There's apps, there's new technology in cars, and we'll talk a little bit about that have also made a difference. So, if we know those things work, where do we go from here? And you heard about the safe system approach this morning. How many people have never heard that term? Okay, good. You guys are doing your job here in Utah. That's awesome. So the safe system approach really does focus on the human, the person. What can we do to make sure that folks are protected out there on the road? But it takes a whole lot of groups of folks working together. So how do we continue to move this? And I really, truly believe this whole idea of zero, and I've had people challenge me over the years, and I applaud you all for zero is your goal. But I believe if we can get to zero with any age group, it's teens. It's teens and kids. I do believe we can get there. We're making progress, as you saw, but we've got to continue to do this work if we're really, truly going to get there. So we've got to really use what we have here to move the needle. And I'm going to actually add a 6th thing we're going to do. You saw those 5 I mentioned before. But all those things I mentioned really do align with the safe system approach. We talk about safe road users and safer vehicles and safer speeds. So we really need to focus on these things to create that layer of protection, if you will, for teen drivers and everybody else out there on the road. And the other thing I challenge you today is if people say to you, oh, teen drivers, yeah, I don't really deal with teen drivers. Remind them that you're sharing the road with teen drivers, right? So many of the people, 60% of the people who die in teen driver crashes, teen driver involved crashes, aren't teens. They're other drivers with passengers, they're pedestrians, they're bicyclists. So we all need to care about this issue because it's really affecting all of us. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about GDL. Okay, we have to continue to strengthen our GDL laws. There is no perfect GDL law in this country. And I'm in a state where we have the oldest licensing age, and it has made a huge difference. We have states that have passenger restrictions. You have a great passenger restriction. 0. Amen. That's what it should be. But you can do better in terms of the restriction on nighttime driving. The most dangerous time for anybody to be on the road is at night. But your restriction is weak. Okay? We need to do more about thinking about, again, inexperience and brain development and how can we move the needle in that area. So we know that when we look at increasing ages, and this is a challenge. I was just in a workshop about pedestrian safety, and a gentleman asked at the end, he said, how can we get people to go back and get training after they're licensed? Like every 5 years, shouldn't people have to go back? Because think about it, if you have a license for something, maybe you're a licensed engineer or you're a driver ed teacher, you're a teacher, you gotta get CEUs, right? You gotta do continuing ed. Why don't we require drivers to get continuing ed? Because things change all the time, but we don't do that. So it's hugely challenging. So I truly believe that we need to think about what age we license, okay, what age we start this process, the holding periods, how do we improve these things so that we can really get the benefit. The other thing you heard Lisa say this morning, and I made a note of it, and this is so important, is right now, the way GDL laws work in almost every state except 2 is that when you turn 18, if you haven't gotten your license yet, you age out of your GDL system. Well, guess what? The brain doesn't fully mature until you're in your mid-20s. So you're not reaping the benefits of graduated driver's license, which we know works. So we need to think about, right now, should we allow people under 24, 25 to age out of GDL if they haven't started yet? I don't think so. In my state, everybody under 21 has to go through graduated driver's license program, the full program. Anybody over 21 has to go through a modified GDL, even if you're 40, because you're inexperienced. You might have that brain maturity, but you're still inexperienced, you haven't driven before. So we need to think about that. We need to think about what can we do to continue to strengthen GDL laws because we know they absolutely work. And the one thing I love, this QR code goes to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's Graduated Driver's License Calculator. Does anybody use this? Everybody heard about this? It's a great, great way to look at where's my state today, and if I made some changes, what would the gains be? What would the gains be? And I'll give you an example. So if Utah raised its current permit age from 15 to 16, and that's not a huge stretch, folks, because many states do this, it could result in a 13% reduction in fatal crashes and about a 3% reduction in collision claims. And raising the licensing age from 16 to 16 and a half would generate another 7% reduction in fatal crashes and another 3% reduction in collision claims. So we're not perfect. We know as we continue to investigate graduated driver's licensing that we can do more. The optimal, right now based on the research, the optimal curfew or nighttime driving restriction is before 9 p.m. There are a couple states that do it. Okay? There are a couple states that do it. And I really caution for those states who say, well, and I don't recall what's in Utah's law, but if you're driving to school or coming from a school activity at night, we'll give you a pass. They're still inexperienced. They're still immature. Just because they're coming from a school activity doesn't mean they aren't at risk. So we need to think about these things when it comes to graduated driver's licenses. When it comes to parents, we have to do more. We have to do more. We have to bolster parent and guardian involvement with their teens, and we have to get them to understand what GDL is. It's not a law enforcement program. It's a parent program. It gives parents the minimum standards they need to exceed, not meet. I'm going to say that again. It gives parents the minimum standards they must exceed, not meet. You get where I'm going here? Because let's face it, we are a world where, okay, I got to do this, and I'm just going to do this, and I'm done. The more we can do for our teens when it comes to preparing them to get out there and drive safely, the better. So parents have to understand what GDL is. And a lot of parents, kind of treat it cavalierly. So when I was working with my son when he was 16 and I was teaching a parent-teen orientation program in his high school, we have a voluntary program in my state called Shared Skis that I helped develop. And I would have parents walk in, and the teens would get them there. The way we got them there is they could not park on campus if they didn't go through this program with a parent or guardian. So you better believe those kids are like, come on, Mom and Dad, we got to go tonight, right? Think about it, right? Well, Mom and Dad would walk in, the season premiere of Dancing with the Stars is on tonight. The Bachelor's on tonight, and I'm here. I'm like, well, come on in, welcome. 70 minutes, that's all we ask. We ask 70 minutes of their time. Very action-oriented, working together. We focused on 5 key objectives. At the end of that program, I think and I taught, can't tell you how many thousands of parents I taught, not just in my son's school, but across the state. I think I only had one parent who came up to me and said that was a bunch of bunk. Everybody else looked at me and said, holy moly, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? So we have to think about how do we help parents understand what this is. Because when I was learning to drive in Pennsylvania, I got my permit at 16 and I held it for 20 days. My dad took me back and forth out on the road, and then I took my driving test and I was cut loose. And like my son, 6 months later, I had a little crash. Okay? So I didn't go through anything like this, and most parents haven't been through this. So we have to help them understand we've evolved. We've learned. We know that graduated driver's licensing works, and it's for you, Mom and Dad, to protect your children. So we strongly recommend, my organization and our partners recommend building a parent education component into your licensing requirement if you can, and if not, at your high school, have a parent-teen driving night. Does anybody do this? Yes, thank you. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And even if a parent says, well, I've already had, my first child go through it, doesn't matter. Make sure they go with their second and their third child. Okay? It's really important that they do this together and they set those ground rules. I cannot overstate that. Really, really, really important. And I want parents to help, we want to help parents make the link between the risk for their teens and how GDL works to address that risk. The 2 most important things in your teen driving law is that nighttime and that passenger restriction. Because if you put a teen behind the wheel and you have one of his friends in the car, the crash rate just went up 50%. The research is there, right? Okay, so we need to do this. This is really, really important. We also have a new report that came out. That's this QR code. We have a national cooperative research program that we manage with NHTSA. And they just came out with a new report looking at teens. And they used naturalistic driving data. And they really focused on what's happening out there. And a couple things, and you should all know this is not surprising, but the research again confirms teens with more supervised driving practice during the learner's permit phase have fewer crashes. So more is better, right? What's your requirement for behind the wheel practice in Utah? 40? 40 hours. Research says 70 to 100 at least. Okay, so we want parents to do this. Keep building on that. Remember, minimum standards. Practice driving at night or on an unfamiliar route, reduce risky behaviors. Never, and I always say to parents, never just throw your kids the keys and send them out the door if they've not been on that route before, especially at night. Many teams don't meet the minimum requirement of practice hours during the permit phase, so using tracking apps really helps. It's one thing to have to fill out a form and take it to the DMV, but have them use apps to do this. Speeding. Once a team gets comfortable behind the wheel, they're more likely than any other age group to be involved in a fatal speeding crash. So we've got to really focus on that speeding issue and help families understand this. We did another report on that a few years ago. And parental involvement is critical, but it is incredibly low. So driver ed teachers, do everything you can to get parents involved in your program. Send home homework that they have to do with mom and dad or the guardian or whoever is that adult in their life. And don't be afraid to enlist coaches and others in this process. Lots of influencers, teen advisors. My ex-husband's a hockey coach, so yes, we are a hockey family. And when New Jersey changed its passenger restriction and nighttime driving law, which was back in 2008, I remember sitting down with my husband and saying, you have late night hockey practices. You have teams that hold GDL licenses. They cannot drive home from practice after 11 o'clock. And he looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? I said, they can't. It's against the law. And it is incredibly dangerous. And do you want that liability? I don't want to lose my house. If you knowingly allow people on your team, students, players, to drive after the curfew, you are liable. We worked with the Coaches Association, the Athletics Association in our state, and we did a ton of education to help coaches understand this. But engage with coaches. They can be your partners too. Really, really important. I could beat that horse till it's dead, but I don't want to do that. So I'll keep moving on. We need to ensure the training that our higher risk drivers need meet good quality standards. When was the last time you truly looked at your driver ed standards in Utah and you looked at your curriculum and said, is this really as up to date as it could be? Anybody want to share? Anybody? I'm not throwing stones, but we have a challenge here. We have National Driver Education and Training Standards. There's a group called ANSTE, the horrible acronym, ANSTSE, who is tasked with developing national standards. We developed those back in 2010, 2011. They are there, and there are tools to help you look at those standards and say, where is my state? How do I measure up? There's also national curriculum that includes how to engage parents. All these tools are available online through ATSEA. How many people know ATSEA? Great, okay, ADTSEA. And Brett Robinson is here with ATSEA. He's the executive director, so take advantage of the time while he's here to chat with him about this. But we've got to raise the bar. That's really, really important. I can't overstate that. We also have to make sure that driver education and training is available to everybody. We have states where the only way you get this and to get a license is you've got to go through a commercial program. Well, what if you can't afford to do that? And we know, you heard Lisa talk about this morning, the impact of driving on our health, our well-being, our safety. We know a driver's license opens the door to economic opportunity. It opens the door to more education. It opens the door to access to health care. So we need to help teens who are in those situations. And my organization has really been challenging states, licensing agencies, and highway safety offices to think about ways to get funding out there so kids can get them. We work with foster youth. That's a group that many people don't think about. But if they don't have the opportunity to get a license, they're often waiting till much later in life, and they're really missing out. I think it's important. We're also challenging states to consider bills that would require anybody under, say, 24, 25 to have to go through some kind of training. Washington State, and you heard about them this morning with Lisa, but Washington State's been trying to move some legislation to do this, but they also have funding tied to it as well. So it's really, really important. We've got a couple states that are offering scholarships to enable kids. Ohio has this great scholarship program that started with the Highway Safety Office with the governor, Governor DeWine. He's a very safety-oriented governor, and they're making millions of dollars available to help kids from lower economic statuses get education and get training. That's important. Let's talk peer-to-peer, okay? Peer-to-peer. So that URL you see down down there on the screen, that gets you to the peer-to-peer report that I wrote for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And I can't overstate how valuable this is as a part of a broader environmental approach to traffic safety. But I'm going to tell you, not all programs are equal. So you saw a slide that Lisa shared this morning, but we have what we call 8 success indicators. So how many of you run any kind of peer-to-peer program in your schools? Anybody? Wow, nobody. Is there a program in your school that maybe you're not running, but somebody else is? You got a golden opportunity here, folks. So what I want you to think about is these programs to work, they have to be inclusive. You got to have ways to sustain them. There has to be that funding mechanism. They have to have adult support. There has to be somebody that's foundational. We have to train the kids to help them understand the problems. And we know there's opportunities to do that. They have to have measurable objectives so they can say, am I making progress? Are we getting things done? They have to be positive. And even I say this in driver ed classes, gore doesn't work. Scare tactics don't work. The research is clear. It's not sustainable. They may go, oh, they may be frightened at first, but they walk out of that room, and that's not going to happen to me. Or that's just fabricated, that's fictionalized. No, it doesn't work. Incentives and recognition are critical, and we need to evaluate these programs. So I encourage you to use that URL code down there to take a look at that. Technology. Okay, we're up to 5. I said there's 5, but I'm going to add a 6th thing. But we're talking about technology. Parents have to understand the importance of putting their kids in a vehicle that has as many safety features as possible. Parents have a tendency, and we've all done this, to say, well, I'm going to put my child in the oldest vehicle because, there's a potential of fender benders and dings and things like that. So, if it gets beat up, no big deal. But that's probably the vehicle that's the least safe for them, right? So we want them in vehicles that have lots of technology that can help protect them. How many have heard the term ADAS? A-D-A-S. I see a hand. What is it?
Adaptive Driving Assistance Systems.
Advanced Driver Assistance Systems. It's all the new stuff that's in cars, and actually this started back in 2012. Electronic stability control, which was mandatory in all new vehicles starting in 2012, was probably one of the best things they ever did for teens. It's made a huge difference, particularly because teens have a tendency in those SUVs to roll them over, okay? So things like that. Lane keeping assist, automatic emergency braking, right? Speed control. All those new technologies, research says, help teens. They help all of us, but they absolutely help teens. But here's the kicker. Most people don't know how this stuff works. And oftentimes, if it's in their vehicle, they turn it off. I had a neighbor, Dave, love Dave, big burly guy, drove a Ford Explorer, and he was out washing his car every week. He's always out every week washing his car. An ex-Marine, and one day he said to me, I hate that lane keeping assist in my vehicle. I hate when it gives me that nudge on the steering wheel. I said, but Dave, it's telling you you're kind of moving out of your lane. It's there to help. I hate it. I turned it off. Dave, what are you doing? You're killing me. Come on. We want this. This is important. You need to do this stuff. And so we have to educate the public about how this technology works. We also have to help the public understand that there is no self-driving car. Tesla is not a self-driving car, right? It's not. It is not a self-driving car. Yes, we have Waymos and a few others out there. They are self-driving, but that's a whole different animal. But our cars today don't drive themselves. So all the stuff that we're putting in our cars is there to supplement the most important safety feature, which is what? The driver. A safe, focused, fully engaged driver. So we need the parents and teens to understand this. So again, my plea to all of us working in this is let's educate about this technology. I would encourage driver and teachers, think about having the kids bring a vehicle, have somebody bring a vehicle to your school and show them this stuff. I can't overstate this. And help them understand what it does and doesn't do. Okay? what it does and doesn't do. Because there is over-reliance for some people on this technology, and then there are others, as I said, who unfortunately turn it off. There's also some great technology in cars. Ford has something called My Key. Anybody heard about My Key? See a couple of hands, a couple of head nods. So this is technology that's basically designed to help parents kind of put some parameters around driving, okay? It has some things that they can really focus on limiting speeds, and if they don't have their seatbelts buckled, it doesn't allow them to do certain things. But only about a third of parents know about it. So we're challenging Ford and Ford dealers to do a better job of educating about this. We're actually working with the OEMs, the auto manufacturers, the National Auto Dealers Association to do some work on ADAS to really help people understand how this stuff works. Chevy has something as well that does this. They have something where you can't turn the radio on if you don't have your seatbelt on, okay? So this technology is really good stuff. There's also something called Life 360. Do you know that one? Yeah, I see more head nod. This is great technology. Hyundai has a free Bluetooth technology that is, I can't remember what it's called, Blue Key I think it is, which really can make a difference too. So I really encourage you to think about how can we do more in this area. So the last thing I want to bring up, and there's ADAS of course. I talked about the 6 recommendations. Here's the last one. We need to incorporate, and I started to say this technology and driver responsibility into education. Okay? It's not enough to say this is how you should operate the vehicle, these are the rules of the road, but what you're doing is an awesome responsibility. The choices you make behind the wheel have a ripple effect. Okay? So we need to really focus on that driver responsibility. And some people argue with me, but everybody is a pedestrian. Because when you park your car and you get out and you walk, you're a pedestrian. Not everybody's a driver. So it's incumbent upon drivers to really understand what they're doing and how it impacts others. And we've got to teach this as soon as possible. I say we start teaching it in elementary school and having children call out parents and older siblings when they see things that make them unsafe. We call them iMessages. And there is training to do this. You know, I don't feel safe, Mom, when you pick up your phone, when you're driving. Mom, I'm really scared. I worry about you. Put your seatbelt on. I mean, kids have done amazing things to get people to buckle up. We know how effective young people have been on seatbelt use for adults. But we have to teach this driver responsibility. It's really, really important. And I said this before, in teaching about ADAS in our classrooms, we have to make sure that people aren't over-relying on the technology. Another thing we have to do is focus on electric vehicles and educating young people and parents about them. EVs go really fast. They have a lot of torque. You can get from 0 to 60 really, really quick. I mentioned before, teens are more likely than any other age group to be involved in a fatal speeding-related crash. So we put them in an EV, we need to make sure we're focused on the speed issue. It's really, really important. And we have to make sure they're protecting folks outside the vehicle. So I'm going to wrap it up. There's the QR code again to get to the report, which has all this information in it. My organization is very committed to this issue. We're going to continue to work like crazy to move the needle. I have spent the last almost 40 years doing this work, and I truly believe in it. And I see the results we have. And I'm very heartened by the number of people who come into the room today to talk with me about this and to share and to do the work that you do. I appreciate you very, very much. I challenge you to do more. You know, what is your why? Well, for many of you, your why is, I want to help young people be safe out there on the road, right? Keep going, folks. Our work is far from done. I mean, it's really, really important. So that's how you get a hold of me if you want to chat more about any of this stuff. You heard at the beginning of the program that I have written a book with another person, Tim Hollister is my dear friend and colleague, but I met Tim because he lost his son, Reed, in a single vehicle car crash in 2006. And Tim started blogging about that. About the same time I was, doing my work, and we connected at a conference, and then he turned his blogs into a book. And a few years later, he and I met up again, and we decided to do a second edition of the book. We're doing a third edition, and we make no money off this, folks. This is not a plug. Third edition of the book that will be out this National Teen Safe Driving Week in October, called Not So Fast, and I didn't put anything up there, but you can find it. And it's for parents. So if you are doing work with parents, you might encourage them to think about getting a copy of the book. We're working with AAA to try to get more folks aware of the book because we think the message is important. It's really designed to help parents understand the critical role they play in this process and make a big difference. So that's the other thing you're supposed to do before you leave here. So any comments, questions? I threw a lot at you really fast. Told you I talk fast. Anything? Questions, comments? Have I overwhelmed you? Give you a lot to think about, I hope. All right? Okay. All right, well, unless there's not anything else, I'm here if you want to chat. Otherwise, enjoy lunch. Thank you. Hi, Michelle.